All right, let's talk about the Lazy Susan and the top ring for the Mark III Baddeley droid. The top ring goes on top of the body of R2D2, and it's called the top ring, not to be confused with the rings that attach to the dome. There are two rings that attach to the version 2 dome, which is the version of the dome that I printed. So I've got the version 2 dome, the version 2 dome rings, of which there are two, and then this is the top ring from the Mark III files, because you need to use the top ring that goes with your body. If you printed the version 2 body, you need to print the version 2 top ring and use that. An easy way to tell the difference between the version 2 and the Mark III top ring is this small cutout area here that faces forward, where the large data port pieces go underneath, and then the utility arms. This cutout on the Mark III top ring is very shallow. On the V2, it's deeper. It's cut in much deeper. So that's a way to tell the two apart. Another thing that Michael Baddeley's done is he's put these slots in that hold square nuts. So you can put a square nut in there, and then I've got hot glue to keep them from falling out. And then when you go to attach the top ring to your Lazy Susan, there's different Lazy Susans. This is the Granite Earth that I have. There's the Tam B. There's Rockler, although I think I read somewhere that Granite Earth uses the Rockler bearing, and then they pre-drill the holes for you. So you're basically buying a Rockler bearing that they've done the work of drilling the holes in. I'm not sure if that's true, but just know that there are different Lazy Susans, and they will have different diameters. Both the inner ring and outer ring could be different sizes. So what I'm saying about my build is the Granite Earth Lazy Susan, and might not be exactly the same if you get one of the other ones. But I just wanted to go over a little bit of what I found getting parts ready to put this onto the body so I can get the legs onto the body. So what I wanted to talk about are the bolts and the threaded rods that come up through the body of the Mark III design and go through these holes with the recessed areas to strengthen the body. So there's 4 threaded rods that go all the way from the very bottom of the droid up all the way to the top of the droid. Stick out here, and then you put a nut here, and then there's a nut at the bottom, and that compresses all of the body rings parts together to give it added strength. So there's 4 of those, and then the shoulder modules for the Mark III also have 2 threaded rods. They don't go all the way through the body, they go almost all the way through the body. They go down to about where the greebles are in the bottom ring of the body, and then up through the shoulder modules and through here to secure those shoulder modules in place. So what you've got is, you've got the body when you're ready to put this top ring on, and you've got 8 threaded rods sticking up through it, and then this goes down on those threaded rods, and then they all get bolted down. So in the US, it's hard to get threaded rod in a metric size without ordering it. So a lot of people use what I did, which is 8-32 threaded rod. So this is a piece that I had cut for an ankle, or for a axle for the Vex wheels for the outer drive units, and I had made it a bit too short, so I cut a new piece, and this is just a scrap thing that I bring to the hardware store when I'm looking for hardware and want to make sure I've got the right size. So It's very close to the recommended 4mm threaded rod. You see it goes through those holes just fine. But the problem became when I realized that I was going to have to tighten those down, the nuts down. Now, yes, this is a rusty one that I just pulled from my garage here. But the main thing is, picture this short piece is going all the way up through the body, and then you need to secure it there. Well, here's the problem I was running into. An 8-32 hex nut on the 8-32 threaded rod needs an 11/32 driver to screw it in place. And as you might be able to see, hopefully, the 8/32 driver is too big for this recessed hole. There is no way that it is going to tighten a nut, because it's not going to be able to grab a hold of it because the nut doesn't stick up high enough. And you probably don't want it to stick up past that recessed area, at least not that far, to be able to get a hold on it, because it might interfere with the Lazy Susan. So I had to figure out, how am I going to do this? Now, when I originally cut my threaded rods to the right length, I did use these large nuts, and I used needle nose pliers. And it was a pain in the neck trying to get needle nose pliers and tighten these things down. So now that I'm at the stage where hopefully I'll be able to put the top ring on, and if I'm lucky, not take it off again, although I'm sure something will happen somewhere where I need to do it, but hopefully not for a while. I wanted to figure out a better way to tighten those nuts. So this is where I discovered something that I had never heard of before, and that is a term. If you can see here, these are 8/32 hex nut extra small pattern. So there's a term, small pattern nuts, also called narrow nuts. And what they are, they have 8/32 size hole in them for the threads. But as you can see, the outside diameter is much smaller. So I probably didn't need to get extra small pattern nuts here. I probably should have just gone with small pattern, but this is just what I grabbed off Amazon and ordered. I only need 8 and I got 100. So who knows when I'll use these again, but you can definitely see that they are way smaller diameter. Now, the other thing that why I shouldn't have got extra small pattern is because they're also smaller in height. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. I should have pulled one out of the package, but you get the idea. They're probably maybe half the thickness of this, maybe a little bit more than half. But because they're not as deep, it's not going to be grabbing onto as many threads of the threaded rod. And that makes me a little bit nervous that they might strip and come off if there's a lot of pressure. I don't think there's going to be that much pressure on them. I think it'll be fine, but if I was to do it again, I probably wouldn't get extra small pattern nuts. I would just get small pattern nuts. So 11/32 is what you need for a standard 8/32 nut. 5/16 is a small pattern nut, and the ones I got extra small pattern are 1/4 inch. So if we go over here, this 1/4 inch, sorry, I'm trying to switch hands here so my shadow's not in the way. The 1/4 inch has plenty of room to spare in there. So tightening that is going to be a piece of cake, no problem at all. The 5/16 on the other hand, and part of why I went with the extra small pattern, just fits in there. In fact, you have to wedge it in there, but it does fit in there, and you would be able to tighten the nut. It's just that it just barely fits in that hole. So that's why I ordered the extra small pattern. And when I got them, I went, wow, that really is not only smaller, what they call flat to flat, right? It's a hex nut. So they measure from one flat edge to the other flat edge, flat to flat. So not only are they smaller flat to flat, they're also smaller in thickness. So I'll use these. I think they'll be fine. But I wanted to explain for other people who have used the 8/32 threaded rods, and if you're in a similar situation where you're using needle nose pliers to attach the nuts in this small open area, do yourself a favor and look for small pattern nuts, and it might just save you some headache. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to use these, which unfortunately I can't tell you exactly what the measurements are. I went to Ace Hardware. They were the smallest metric washers that they had in the open plastic bins where you can just scoop out handfuls, right? They were 33 cents each, which is crazy, but they just fit over the 832 rod, and they just fit in these holes. I mean, they just fit inside these holes. So they're a perfect size to spread the load, the pressure out over this, instead of just having that little tiny nut that's just a bit bigger than that hole pulling down on the weight. So they're just the right size washer. And then I'm going to use, because these are so thin, I'm going to use these. They're just number 8, what they call internal tooth washers. So they're not split washers, they're just washers that have these little teeth cut into them that kind of bend up and bend down, so that when I'll put the washer in there, I'll put this on top, and then I'll put the nut down. Hopefully I won't need to use Loctite, because the nut, in combination with these teeth and the washer, will kind of spring load and hold everything in place. My original plan was to use 832 nylon locking nuts, which I did not find in small pattern. I didn't really look all that hard, just hard enough for me to not be able to easily find them. So I don't know if nylon lock nuts come in small pattern, which might be because they have to have enough room in there to hold a little nylon ring, which is what helps these grab and keep from coming loose due to vibrations. So basically, instead of using these 8/32, that there would be no real way to tighten, I'm going to be using washers, tooth washers, and the extra small pattern nuts with the 1/4 inch driver, and I should be fine. So the other thing, since I'm out here and I've got the Lazy Susan out, might as well just go real quick over this. This is the orientation it sits on the droid. This outer part is bolted to the body. And I think I might have said that backwards. See, this just gets so confusing. Okay, yes. It's confusing because of the whole I'm upside down and I'm right side up. Okay, this is the orientation that it sits on the body. So, it goes like this. Okay, so your top ring has those threaded rods coming through and bolted down so that this is bolted to your body, and then the Lazy Susan sits on top and has four, at least this granite earth one, has four holes recessed that line up with these slots in the Mark III top ring. These slots, as you can see, there's a nut in there, a square nut. So I had to actually buy 8 32nd square nuts because, or no I didn't, because these are M4 square nuts. Okay, never mind. These are M4 square nuts. Again, this is confusing. These are M4 square nuts, and there's a slot that they go in, and then you just put some hot glue over it so the nuts don't fall out. And that's because, as I said at the beginning, there are different brands of Lazy Susans with different dimensions. And so Michael Baddeley put this elongated slot with the captive nut in there so that this top ring will fit different Lazy Susans. So, again, this top ring is bolted to the body through these large recessed areas, 8 bolts for the 8 threaded rods. Then the Lazy Susan goes on top and gets an M4 bolt. I'm not sure of the exact height of that yet. I mean, all I have to do is try one and see if it sticks out the bottom to see. But you get an M4 metric nut with the recessed head, and it goes in all 4 of the recessed holes of the Lazy Susan, which hopefully will line up with these slots with the captive nuts. So it will be bolted so that the M4 bolts are flush, and they hold the Lazy Susan to the top ring. The top ring is held to the body, and then your inner ring that has the tooth gear bolts to this inner piece, and that's what spins. Because this outer piece is bolted to the body, it does not rotate. This is the piece that rotates with the tooth gear, which attaches to some, but not necessarily all, of these inner bolt holes. So bolts come from the back, which is recessed, and stick up through the tooth gear, and then the dome slides onto those bolts. Now there is, Tim Hebel has made a magnetic dome system, which I really thought about using, but I don't plan on having R2's head on and off enough that I think I'm going to use it. But he does have an alternate version of parts that are on the Michael Baddeley Patreon page for, instead of using bolts that stick up out of the Lazy Susan that the head slots onto, so basically the head just pulls on and off, it uses rare earth magnets and then brackets inside the dome so that the dome sticks firm to the Lazy Susan with magnets. And so when you pull it off, you just have to basically grab it on 2 ends and pull it until the magnets release. So it's not as easy to pull off as a dome that's just sitting on top of bolts that are coming up through holes in the rings on the bottom of the dome. It's actually magnetic force that's holding it in place So it takes more effort to pull it off. So it's not something that if you're at a con or something, you're taking it somewhere and somebody grabs the dome and gives it a hug and lifts it, might lift your dome off or something. It's firmly attached. So it's a really good system. It's just that I don't think I'm gonna reprint everything just to add that functionality to mine. But if you're not to that stage yet, or you think it's something you might be interested in, again, it's in the Patreon files for Michael Baddeley. Somewhere, I don't know exactly where. I think it might be under the Mark III and then custom, and then it's Tim Hebel mods. He's made several mods for the Mark III that are excellent. So that was about all I wanted to talk about with that today. Sorry for this confusion. Again, having this right side up and upside down is it's still a little bit confusing to me because I've had the top ring on the body once just so I could mark the 4 threaded rods that go up through the body and cut them to length. I still need to put it on, mark, and then cut the 4 threaded rods that go up through the shoulders and cut those to length, and then put my hardware on and have it bolted in place. The reason that I'm working on this right now is because I have just today finished painting what I think is everything I need to be painted to be able to put that top ring onto R2D2. And that is the utility arms and the large data port pieces. Now the reason that those, at least one utility arm, should be painted is because the top utility arm has a pin, a 3D printed pin that goes down through a bearing that then goes in this opening, another bearing in the bottom opening, and then the pin goes into the body. And that's what holds this in place, and it goes through where the large data port pieces fit. So the top utility arm needs to be mounted in place before the data port pieces can be put over the top of where the utility arm pin goes through the body, before the top ring can go on top of the large data port pieces. So I think now, as of today, I have got everything painted that I need to start getting him on his feet. Now, I do want to let these cure for quite a while before I do that. I painted, like all the blue stuff I've done, I painted these with a base coat of the Rust-Oleum bright metallic aluminum, and then gave that a week or more to dry, and then I go over with the Duplicolor Sonic Blue Pearl, and then I go over that with the Rust-Oleum, I think it's 2X Clear, Gloss Clear. So I'm a little nervous, well, I'm very nervous to be honest, because it's, several layers of paint, and then these go into the body, and if they're not lined up just right, they're going to be rubbing against the body as they open and close, which I'm guessing happens. If your alignment's not dead on, you're probably going to get a little bit of rubbing. So I wanted to have these cure for a while just to minimize how much paint might come off if they rub on the body. They seem to go in pretty good. They had a little bit of room, so they weren't just really tight and already scraping on the body before they were painted. So I think I'm going to be all right with them. But you never know. They do now have paint up here, on the top and the bottom that are in the body that hold it vertically in place. So that paint's going to add some thickness. So that's not something I really could test all that well to make sure that that's, not going to cause an issue. So again, I want them to cure for a while before I start putting them in the body, and they're going to be rubbing on the plastic. That's just part of how it's going to work. At the very least, the bottom of the utility arm will be rubbing on the plastic where it sits in the body, or maybe the bearing will. I can't remember if the bearings actually stick a little bit proud of the top surface, so maybe they actually are what sits on the body. But either way, nervous about that. Hopefully my paint job turned out okay. Like everything, I'm not 100%. It's not as perfect as I would like it to be, but I think it's pretty darn acceptable. I could have spent more hours and hours and hours hiding seam lines and getting things smooth. But I think I ended up with a pretty good result. The biggest right there, there's a little paint dribble down at the bottom there, and you can kind of see the line because this is two pieces that are glued together in the middle. But that's the back side of the arm that no one's going to see. I tried to concentrate on this part, and I think I got it pretty darn good, where I'm happy enough with it. I'll always find faults, but that's just the way it is, and I think it's perfectly acceptable. The data port pieces, well, I had interesting issues with them. I had bubbling, which I've never had before. And what was really odd about that, I think it was the silver paint reacting with the blue paint. And you can see right there, I've got these little pits. And I'm actually going to leave that as it is, because, well, you hardly see this part. It's the large data port. It's in shadow the whole time, and I actually kind of think the pits are a little bit cool. When I originally painted this, I painted it as I did everything else, with the silver paint and then the blue paint and then clear. But for whatever reason, I got bubbles in it. And then I sanded the bubbles off and I could see the silver through it. So there's a couple things I did different with these pieces. It's the middle of October now, and I'm running out of nice days, although it's looking like a record October for nice days and temperatures. I'm still nervous that, is this the last nice day that I can paint? So, a couple things were different with this than the other blue parts that I had painted, and the other half of the data port is pretty much has fewer bubbles, but still kind of has the issue. The silver paint was the bottom of the can, so the Rust-Oleum bright metallic aluminum finish was the very last in the can. And as I was spraying it, when you spray that stuff, it does have sparkle stuff in it. I don't know if that's mica or actual pieces of metal that make it have that metallic look. And there was quite a bit flying through the air as I was painting it. So I think that some of that, even though I try to keep shaking the can as good as I can to mix all the contents, I think maybe when I got down to the bottom of the can, there was actually more of that metallic material left in the paint. And so when I painted these with that base coat of the bright metallic finish, it got some of that stuff, more of that stuff on the surface than prior use of the can. And so when I then, even after waiting a week or more, that I let it cure, I think there were some bits of that stuff that were kind of poking out, you could say, because I did not sand after painting that metallic base coat. I didn't sand it. So I just went right to the blue paint and then the clear, and then I noticed bubbles started happening. So it was either the silver paint, like I said, the bottom of the can of silver paint had material in it, and then when I sprayed the blue didn't adhere to that material. Or it was the fact that when I originally sprayed these blue, the temperature was about 69, and the humidity was 59%. So I think the humidity might have been a problem. So it could have been a combination of the humidity and the silver paint. I'm not sure. But I sanded it down, and not all the way down to the base coat of primer, which I probably should have. I just sanded it until I got those bubbles all popped, and it was wet. I was wet sanding it with 400 grit, and to my finger it felt smooth. But that turned out just to be because those pits are really, really small. So once I gave it another coat of blue, I had those little pits in there. And at first I was just totally bummed. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to sand these all the way down and I'm going to redo them again. And then I noticed that it actually looks like it's metal that has rusted and then been repainted. That's about the same effect you get on a piece of metal that's, the paint's wore off and it's rusted, and then you kind of just sand the rust off and give it another coat of paint. You kind of get that same pitting. So because of that, I thought that's actually kind of cool when you think about it. And especially if I ever get around to weathering it, that's kind of cool. And some people actually, have special ways they actually make that kind of effect. One is like, I think putting salt. They, paint a color and then they put some salt on and paint another color and then rub the paint that adheres to the salt off to reveal the color underneath. So it's just kind of a rusted, pitted look that I figured, well, since, you're never going to be closer than probably this to it anyway, where you can't see it, and it's in shadow because this piece is on the bottom and then this piece goes over the top of it, I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm not going to take the time to sand the whole thing down and reprime it and fill all the holes and try it again because I don't know how much good weather I've got. I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm okay with it. The top piece has just a few of the bubbles. It wasn't nearly as bad as the bottom piece. So there's a couple there that you might be able to see because the upper part does stick out from the droid a ways. But again, I was happy with it. I was like, okay, you know what? That's actually not that bad of an effect. And again, no one's going to see it unless, they're super close to it anyway. I'm fine with it. So I was really nervous today when I went to paint this because I'm like, well, if I have that same problem, I'm going to have to sand these down and redo them because I don't want the utility arms to have that look to them. So I was starting with a new can of the silver paint, and I went over it with my fingers, before I painted the blue. I still didn't wet sand the silver metallic, but I went over it with my fingers, and I only found one small little bit that felt like a little raised bit of something, and I, with my fingernail, was just able to just push it off the paint, so it felt smooth after that. So today was a lower humidity, and today is also a warmer day, so I went out and I think the temperature was around 75 when I went out today and painted these blue. They had been sitting for about a week and a half with the silver, and then I painted them blue today and then clear over the blue about 15 minutes later, just like I did the leg parts that are blue, and it looks like it worked this time. So yeah, it was either using the bottom of the can of the silver spray, or it was the humidity, or a combination of the two possibly, and the temperature. So I'm just glad that these ones did not have that problem. They look fine. They look good. I'm happy with them. Something that's only 2 pieces, you'd really think, well, what's so hard about that? They even have filament alignment holes. So when you put the 2 parts together, there's little bits of filament that help keep them lined up, but still they didn't line up perfectly right. So it took a bit of sanding and filler material to get the things to look one piece. Some people actually, there is a file somewhere where the utility arms are one piece and you print them like this on the print bed, and you use supports under the entire bottom because you don't really see the bottom that much. So then you have a nice smooth top. It's not 2 pieces stuck together, it's just one piece, and you just have to spend some more time on the back to clean the back up. But the front is what you want to look really nice, like it's a piece of, you know, aluminum or whatever, a single piece and not 2 pieces put together. So I was thinking about doing that as well, but I decided, well, I'll get these, you know, with the time I have, I'll just get these, since I'd already done some work on finishing them. I'll just do my best with these and see how they turn out. And like I said, I'm perfectly happy with these. They turned out pretty darn good. So a bit of a long video today. Sorry about that. Should probably put it into 2 pieces, but I'm just going to go ahead and upload it as one piece. And yeah, that's about it. So hopefully I can get him on his feet. It's just the main problem now is wanting to let these blue pieces, since they do have blue and clear both sprayed on them on the same day, give them plenty of time to cure before I start trying to put them inside the body. But then I'll be on to putting the shoulder modules in, putting the threaded rod in, cutting to size, bolting this top ring on, then I can put the legs on, and he'll be on 3 feet.